The horizon bleeds orange against the Pacific sky as a massive gray shape emerges from the morning mist. Through the salt-stained periscope of a half-sunken bunker, Takeshi Yamamoto squints at what appears to be an impossible sight: a floating factory, white steam rising from its deck like incense from a temple altar. But this story began 6 months ago, when such luxury was not just unimaginable but morally repugnant. The volcanic soil of Iwo Jima crunches beneath Yamamoto's bare feet as he distributes the morning ration, a handful of rice mixed with tree bark, barely enough to fill a child's palm. His ribs show through his torn uniform like the framework of a bombed cathedral. Around him, 37 men who once stood proud as cherry blossoms now resemble autumn leaves, brown and brittle, waiting for the wind to take them. "Today we die for the Emperor," Yamamoto whispers, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. This is not despair speaking, this is purpose. Every grain of rice saved, every moment of hunger endured, every comfort refused is a prayer offered to the divine wind that will surely come. His father's voice echoes from childhood: "Luxury corrupts the soul, my son. A warrior needs only duty and honor." The American bombardment begins at dawn, but Yamamoto feels something deeper than shells shaking the ground. He feels righteous certainty. While the enemy wastes resources on overwhelming firepower, his men demonstrate the superior strength of spirit over matter. They have learned to survive on almost nothing, to find strength in emptiness, to transform suffering into sacred purpose. When the white flag finally rises over their position, 3 days later, Yamamoto stares at it, with the confusion of a priest watching his temple burn. Surrender was never part of the equation. His hand moves instinctively to his service pistol, but American voices are already shouting orders, and rough hands pull him from the rubble of his convictions. The first shock comes in the form of a small tin can, thrust into his dirt-caked hands by a young Marine whose face seems impossibly clean, impossibly well-fed. Yamamoto turns the can over in his palms, reading the English words he cannot understand. The Marine makes eating gestures, pointing to his mouth. When Yamamoto finally opens the can, the smell of processed meat, rich, fatty, abundant, hits him like a physical blow. His stomach, accustomed to bark and hope, cramps with confused hunger. But this must be theater, he tells himself. Propaganda. They want him to believe in their abundance so he will betray his emperor's secrets. He takes the smallest possible bite, tasting salt and fat in quantities that would feed his entire squad for a day. The wrongness of it burns his throat. The LST that carries him toward the American fleet cuts through waves that sparkle like scattered diamonds under the afternoon sun. Yamamoto sits with 17 other prisoners, each man lost in his own universe of disbelief. The American guards share cigarettes with casual generosity, not celebration cigarettes, not victory cigarettes, just ordinary Tuesday cigarettes. One guard offers Yamamoto a lucky strike, and he stares at the white paper cylinder as if it might explode. "No smoke for 6 months," he tells himself in Japanese. But when the tobacco touches his lungs, when the nicotine floods his starved nervous system, his body betrays his ideology with an involuntary sigh of pleasure. Shame follows immediately. This is exactly the kind of weakness his training warned against: the seductive power of enemy luxury designed to corrupt pure intention. As they approach the main fleet, the scale of American abundance becomes impossible to dismiss as propaganda. Ships stretch across the horizon like a floating city, not just warships, but support vessels, supply ships, hospital ships, and stranger things still. The prisoner transport slides between hulls the size of apartment buildings, each one loaded with enough firepower to level Tokyo, each one somehow clean, organized, purposeful. But it's the smaller details that crack Yamamoto's certainty, like hairline fractures in glass. A sailor on a nearby destroyer casually dumps a bucket of what looks like perfectly good food scraps over the side, enough protein to keep a Japanese soldier alive for weeks. Another crew member tosses a half-smoked cigarette into the water without a second thought. The waste is not just shocking, it's philosophically impossible. The prisoner processing center aboard the command ship operates with mechanical efficiency. Each captured soldier receives a medical examination, clean clothes, and a meal that would qualify as a feast in any Japanese military context. Yamamoto watches American medics treat his infected wounds with the same care they would show their own men. This cannot be mere propaganda. No audience exists here to witness such performances. But the moment that shatters his first layer of understanding comes at dinner. The mess hall buzzes with casual conversation as American sailors consume portions that would feed a Japanese family for days. They complain about the food. Actually, complain. A young seaman pushes away a half-eaten plate of beef stew, muttering something about wanting fried chicken instead. Yamamoto stares at the abandoned meal, more protein than he has seen in 6 months, and feels something fundamental shift inside his chest. "This is impossible," he whispers in Japanese to the prisoner beside him, a sergeant named Sato who has been silent since capture. "No army can sustain such waste." Sato's hollow eyes reflect the fluorescent lighting of the mess hall. "Unless waste is not waste to them," he replies quietly. The word normal hangs in the air between them like a dangerous spell. If this abundance is normal for American forces, what does that say about the entire foundation of Japanese military philosophy? What does it say about the virtue of suffering, the strength found in emptiness, the moral superiority of doing without? That night, lying on a clean mattress for the first time in 2 years, Yamamoto stares at the metal ceiling of the prisoner quarters and feels his certainty crumbling like sand castles at high tide. Through the porthole he can see lights from dozens of ships stretching to the horizon, each one representing a level of industrial capacity that makes his homeland's spiritual over material philosophy seem not just wrong, but tragically naive. Tomorrow, they tell him, he will be transferred to a larger facility. Tomorrow he will see things that will challenge everything he believes about strength, honor, and what it truly means to care for one's soldiers. But tonight, surrounded by the alien comfort of American efficiency, Takeshi Yamamoto begins the first, terrifying step toward a truth that will reshape his understanding of war itself. Perhaps the army that can feed its soldiers is stronger than the army that teaches them to starve. The prisoner transport arrives at the main American naval base as the sun reaches its zenith, casting everything in harsh, revealing light. Yamamoto shields his eyes against the glare, reflecting off what appears to be a floating metropolis. Dozens of ships arranged with geometric precision, each one a testament to industrial might that dwarfs anything in the Imperial Navy's arsenal. But it's not the size of the ships that stops his breath. It's the casual abundance radiating from every surface, every interaction, every throwaway gesture of the men who work here. A crane operator, finishing his lunch shift, tosses an entire apple, one perfect bite missing, into the harbor. Yamamoto watches it bob on the waves, more fresh fruit than his unit saw in their final month on Iwo Jima. The operator lights a cigarette, takes 3 drags, then flicks it away to start another. The mathematics of waste assault Yamamoto's trained mind. That discarded apple could have sustained a soldier for half a day. Those cigarettes represented a week's worth of tobacco rations. Processing begins in 30 minutes, announces a young ensign whose uniform shows no signs of wear, no patches, no careful mending. The fabric itself seems impossibly clean, impossibly new. How many uniforms does each sailor possess? How can they afford to keep replacing what Yamamoto's men would have worn until it disintegrated? The prisoner intake facility occupies what was once a cargo hold, now converted into a sterile administrative space. Each captured Japanese soldier receives a clipboard with forms in broken Japanese, a pencil, a whole pencil not shared, and instructions to wait in numbered chairs. The chairs themselves are another small impossibility, padded metal seats that look mass-produced, designed for temporary comfort rather than military necessity. Yamamoto fills out his forms with growing bewilderment. Name, rank, unit. Simple questions that feel increasingly meaningless in this context. Around him, other prisoners shift uncomfortably in their clean clothes, all of them grappling with the same fundamental disconnect. They have entered a world where abundance is assumed, where waste is casual, where the very foundations of their military training, scarcity, discipline, sacrifice, appear to be foreign concepts. Yamamoto, Takeshi. His name echoes from a speaker system sophisticated enough to ensure clear communication throughout the ship. He approaches a processing station where a Navy clerk sits behind a desk equipped with multiple typewriters, filing systems, carbon paper, and office supplies that represent more resources than most Japanese military offices possessed. The clerk hands him a kit, actual manufactured items in a canvas bag, toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, razor, towel, and other personal hygiene items that Yamamoto hasn't seen since leaving Japan 2 years ago. The toothbrush alone represents a level of individual care that contradicts everything he understands about military priorities. Armies focus on weapons and strategy, not personal comfort. Yet here is evidence that American forces consider dental hygiene a standard provision. "These are mine?" he asks in broken English, holding up the toothbrush as if it might vanish. The clerk looks up from his paperwork with mild confusion. "Of course they're yours. Replace them when they wear out." He returns to his typing, treating this exchange as routine rather than revolutionary. Replace them. The casual assumption that these items are disposable, renewable, infinite, strikes Yamamoto like a philosophical earthquake. In the Japanese military, a toothbrush was a luxury item carefully preserved and shared. Here, it's treated as routine maintenance, like ammunition or fuel. His temporary barracks assignment reveals new layers of systematic abundance. The sleeping quarters feature individual bunks with clean mattresses, lockers for personal possessions, reading lights, and ventilation systems that maintain comfortable temperatures. Each prisoner receives bed linens, actual sheets and pillows, replaced weekly by a laundry service that operates with factory-level efficiency. But the true revelation comes at dinner. The mess hall stretches across an entire deck, equipped with steam tables, refrigeration units, and cooking facilities that could service a small city. American sailors move through serving lines, loading their trays with portions that violate every principle of military rationing Yamamoto has ever learned. Meat, vegetables, bread, milk, coffee, not carefully measured survival rations, but meals designed for satisfaction and nutrition. He watches a young sailor pile roast beef onto his plate, add mashed potatoes, green beans, rolls with butter, then survey the dessert options before selecting apple pie. The quantities involved represent more calories than a Japanese soldier typically consumed in 3 days. And this sailor is not celebrating a victory or marking a special occasion. This is Tuesday dinner, routine nourishment, the baseline expectation for American military feeding. "You can go back for seconds," explains another prisoner, Sergeant Tanaka, who arrived the previous week. His voice carries a mixture of amazement and shame. "They encourage it. Say it keeps morale high." Yamamoto fills his tray conservatively, taking small portions out of habit and lingering guilt. But even his modest selections represent abundance beyond his recent experience. Fresh meat, cooked vegetables, bread with actual butter, milk that tastes like it came from cows rather than powder. His body responds to the nutrition with involuntary gratitude, strength returning to muscles, clarity to thoughts, warmth to extremities, long resigned to cold. At a corner table, he sits with 5 other Japanese prisoners, all of them eating slowly, reverently, as if afraid the food might disappear. They speak in whispers, sharing the same fundamental confusion. "My grandfather fought in the Russo-Japanese War," murmurs Private Hayashi. "He said soldiers lived on rice and pickled vegetables. That hardship built character, made us stronger than enemies who grew soft on luxury. But look at them." Tanaka gestures toward a table of American sailors laughing over their meal, some of them actually leaving food on their plates. "They are not soft. They defeated us." The observation hangs heavy in the air. These men, sustained by abundance rather than deprivation, had proven themselves superior in combat, strategy, and endurance. Everything Japanese military philosophy taught about the strengthening power of suffering appears to be contradicted by the evidence surrounding them. After dinner, Yamamoto explores the ship with the systematic attention of a trained observer trying to understand enemy capabilities. What he discovers challenges his fundamental assumptions about military priorities and resource allocation. The library contains hundreds of books, magazines, and newspapers available to any sailor. The medical facility rivals civilian hospitals in equipment and staffing. The recreation areas include game rooms, a small theater for movies, even areas designated for personal correspondence, where sailors can write letters home using provided stationery. But it's the waste that continues to stagger him. In the galley, he observes kitchen staff scraping entire plates of uneaten food into garbage bins. A cook explains that Navy regulations require them to prepare 10% more food than needed to ensure no sailor goes hungry. The surplus gets discarded rather than redistributed. Waste as policy, abundance as military doctrine. "We throw away more food than your army eats," the cook says matter-of-factly, not meaning to wound but stating simple operational reality. That night, lying in his clean bunk with his stomach full for the first time in months, Yamamoto stares at the ceiling and tries to process what he's witnessing. This is not propaganda designed to impress prisoners. This is not a special facility created to demonstrate American wealth. This is standard operating procedure, the baseline expectation for how an army treats its personnel. His internal monologue becomes increasingly fractured as competing ideologies clash. If American soldiers are sustained by abundance and still fight effectively, what does that say about the virtue of deprivation? If an army that feeds its men well defeats an army that teaches hunger as discipline, which philosophy actually produces superior warriors? The questions multiply like cracks in ice, each answer creating new contradictions. He remembers his father's teachings about luxury corrupting the soul, but these Americans display no obvious moral corruption. They seem disciplined, organized, effective, sustained by abundance rather than weakened by it. 3 days later, word spreads through the prisoner quarters like wildfire. They will be transferred to a larger facility, and during the journey they will witness something unprecedented. The guards speak of it in casual terms that only amplify the mystery. A special ship, they say, designed for a purpose that defies military logic. "Ice cream ship," one guard explains to a prisoner who speaks better English. "Floating ice cream factory. Supplies the whole fleet." Yamamoto processes this translation with the growing numbness of a man watching his worldview dissolve. An ice cream ship. A vessel dedicated entirely to producing frozen dessert for military personnel, not medical supplies, not ammunition, not fuel. Ice cream. The concept violates every principle of military efficiency he has ever learned. On the morning of transfer, as prisoners line up for transport to what the Americans call a re-education facility, Yamamoto catches his first glimpse of the impossible. A concrete barge painted white, steam rising from multiple vents, with the unmistakable sounds of industrial machinery humming across the water. Other prisoners point and whisper, their faces reflecting the same mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension. This is not a dream or propaganda trick. This is systematic abundance elevated to military doctrine. An army so wealthy, so productive, so confident in its supply lines that it can afford to build factories for dessert, to waste food as policy, to treat luxury as standard equipment. Standing on the deck of the transport as they approach the ice cream barge, Yamamoto feels the final foundations of his beliefs beginning to crack. Everything he was taught about strength through suffering, about the moral superiority of doing without, about luxury as weakness, all of it crumbles in the face of evidence that the army which cares for its soldiers' comfort is the army that wins wars. The barge grows larger as they approach, white and clean and impossible, a floating symbol of everything Japanese military philosophy claimed would lead to defeat. Yet here it floats, victorious, surrounded by the fleet that conquered the Pacific, not through superior suffering, but through superior abundance. Tomorrow he will board that impossible ship and witness the final destruction of his ideology. Tonight, he grips the rail and watches American plenty steaming on the horizon, preparing himself for truths that will reshape everything he thought he knew about war, strength, and what it really means to honor one's soldiers. The concrete barge rises from the Pacific like a white temple, its industrial hymn of churning machinery growing louder as their transport draws alongside. Yamamoto stands at the rail with 17 other prisoners, each man silent in the face of what they are about to witness. The morning sun catches the steam rising from the barge's vents, creating small rainbows in the mist. Even the waste heat from this impossible ship transforms into something beautiful. Every 7 seconds, explains Lieutenant Morrison, their escort, consulting a clipboard with casual pride. 1 gallon of ice cream every 7 seconds. That's the production rate when she's running at full capacity. Yamamoto's mind performs the mathematics automatically, a skill honed by years of calculating rations and supply distributions. 1 gallon every 7 seconds means over 500 gallons per day, enough frozen dessert to provide every man in a Japanese regiment with portions beyond their wildest imagination. And this is not emergency production or special celebration. This is routine manufacturing, baseline abundance, Tuesday operations in the American war machine. The boarding process reveals layers of systematic organization that dwarf anything Yamamoto witnessed in Japanese military logistics. Workers in clean white uniforms operate gleaming steel equipment with the precision of factory technicians, but their conversation flows with the easy camaraderie of men who enjoy their work. No one appears driven by desperation or fear. They seem almost casual about producing miracles. Inside the main production facility, Yamamoto witnesses industrial abundance, elevated to the level of art. Massive refrigeration units hum with electrical power that would supply entire Japanese villages, stainless steel mixing tanks, each one large enough to hold more dairy products than most Japanese soldiers had seen in their entire lives, rotate with mechanical precision. The air smells of vanilla, chocolate, and mechanical efficiency. Sweet abundance, backed by unstoppable productivity. We can make 15 different flavors, explains Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, gesturing toward ingredient storage areas that stretch beyond Yamamoto's sight. Vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, butter pecan. Whatever keeps morale high. 15 flavors. The number echoes in Yamamoto's head like a koan he cannot solve. His entire military career was built around the philosophy that warriors needed only rice and duty. That desire for variety weakened character and distracted from pure purpose. Yet here stands proof that an army offering 15 flavors of frozen dessert had conquered the Pacific, defeated the forces of spiritual purity through systematic attention to soldier satisfaction. As they move through the facility, Yamamoto observes American sailors collecting their ice cream rations with the nonchalant attitude of men picking up mail. No ceremony, no special occasion, just Tuesday afternoon dessert, routine pleasure distributed through logistical excellence. Some sailors actually complain about flavor choices, disappointed that strawberry has run low, hoping chocolate will be available tomorrow. The casual nature of their disappointment strikes Yamamoto like a physical blow. These men have been conditioned to expect abundance so thoroughly that temporary scarcity of a luxury item registers as genuine inconvenience. They inhabit a world where ice cream is not a miracle but a basic service, where military leadership demonstrates competence by ensuring dessert availability rather than teaching endurance of deprivation. Standing in the main production chamber, surrounded by the mechanical symphony of American abundance, Yamamoto feels something fundamental shift in his understanding. This is not just about ice cream. This is about philosophy made manifest, ideology expressed through industrial capacity. The Americans did not win the war despite their abundance. They won because of it. How? He asks. Lieutenant Morrison, the English word carrying the weight of his entire philosophical crisis. Morrison misunderstands the question, thinking Yamamoto wants technical details. Well, we start with dairy products shipped from stateside. Then we have these mixing systems that can handle volume production, and the refrigeration units maintain optimal temperatures throughout the process. But Yamamoto is not asking about machinery. He is asking about worldview. about the entire framework of values that make such a ship possible. How does a military culture justify using precious resources for soldier comfort? How do leaders convince themselves that ice cream production serves strategic objectives? How does abundance become strength rather than weakness? The answer begins to crystallize as he observes the crew's efficiency. These sailors work with the focused competence of men who know their efforts are valued, who understand that their comfort and morale are considered worth significant investment. They are not driven by fear of punishment or promises of honor and death. They are motivated by the practical knowledge that their leadership wants them alive, healthy, and satisfied. This realization cuts through Yamamoto's ideological conditioning like a sword through silk. Japanese military philosophy taught that soldiers should be grateful for the opportunity to suffer for their emperor, that deprivation built character and prepared warriors for ultimate sacrifice. But American military philosophy appears to operate from the opposite assumption that soldiers who are well-fed, comfortable, and confident in their support systems fight more effectively than those driven by desperation and ideology. As their tour concludes, Yamamoto finds himself in the barge's small observation area, looking out over the American fleet stretching to the horizon. Every ship represents not just firepower, but systematic care for the men who operate that firepower. Every vessel in sight is supported by supply chains sophisticated enough to deliver fresh food, medical care, mail from home, and yes, ice cream, to men fighting thousands of miles from their homeland. The scope of this logistical achievement dwarfs any military accomplishment in Japanese history. The Americans have created a floating civilization, a complete society capable of projecting power across oceans while maintaining the creature comforts of peace. They have solved the fundamental problem that destroyed his own forces: how to keep soldiers alive, healthy, and motivated across extended campaigns and hostile environments. That evening, back in his prisoner quarters, Yamamoto sits with his notebook, another small abundance, paper and pencil provided without question, and attempts to process what he has witnessed. The words come slowly, in Japanese characters that seem inadequate to capture the magnitude of his philosophical reversal. "I have seen the future of warfare," he writes. "It belongs not to those who can endure the most suffering, but to those who can eliminate suffering through superior organization. The Americans did not defeat us because they were stronger warriors. They defeated us because they were better at keeping warriors strong." The insight continues to unfold as he writes, each sentence revealing new layers of understanding. Japanese military culture had elevated suffering to virtue, treating logistical limitations as character-building challenges. American military culture had identified suffering as a problem to be solved through industrial innovation. Which approach actually served soldiers better? Which philosophy produced more effective armies? Around him, other prisoners are engaged in similar processes of ideological reconstruction. Quiet conversations in Japanese explore questions that would have been unthinkable months ago. What if abundance is not weakness? What if caring for soldiers' comfort actually enhances rather than diminishes military effectiveness? What if the emperor was wrong about the virtue of suffering? These are dangerous thoughts, revolutionary ideas that challenge the foundation of everything they were taught to believe. But they are also liberating thoughts, opening possibilities for understanding warfare, leadership, and human value that their previous ideology had closed off. 2 weeks later, as rumors spread that the war itself may be nearing an end, Yamamoto receives notification that he will be interviewed by American intelligence officers. The prospect does not frighten him as it once would have. He no longer fears contamination by enemy ideas. He has already been fundamentally changed by what he has witnessed. In the interview room, facing American officers who treat him with professional courtesy rather than contempt, Yamamoto finds himself able to articulate insights that surprise even him. "Your ice cream ship," he says in careful English, "is more important than your battleships." The officers exchange glances, unsure whether to take this seriously. Battleships sink. Other ships, Yamamoto continues. But ice cream ship sinks other philosophy. It proves that army which feeds soldiers wins against army which starves soldiers? Very simple. One officer leans forward with genuine interest. You think logistics won this war? Yamamoto considers the question carefully, thinking about everything he has observed, every assumption he has been forced to reconsider. No, he says finally. Respect won this war. You respect your soldiers enough to give ice cream. We respected only suffering. Your respect makes stronger soldiers. The interview concludes with American officers taking careful notes, recognizing valuable intelligence about Japanese military psychology. But for Yamamoto, the conversation represents something more significant. The first time he has been able to articulate his transformed understanding of what makes armies truly powerful. Walking back to his quarters through corridors that now seem familiar rather than alien, Yamamoto reflects on the journey that brought him from the volcanic soil of Iwo Jima to this moment of clarity. He began as a man absolutely certain that spiritual strength trumped material abundance, that suffering built character, that luxury corrupted warriors. He ends as a man who understands that the greatest military strength lies not in teaching soldiers to endure deprivation, but in developing the industrial and organizational capacity to ensure they never have to. The army that can produce ice cream in the middle of the Pacific is the army that has truly mastered the art of war. The concrete barge still floats on the horizon, white against the evening sky, its machinery humming the mechanical lullaby of American abundance. But Yamamoto no longer sees it as an impossible luxury or a symbol of decadent excess. He sees it as proof of a profound military truth. Real power lies not in the ability to make soldiers suffer, but in the ability to make their suffering unnecessary. Tomorrow will bring new revelations, new challenges to old certainties, new opportunities to understand what it really means to honor the men who fight. Tonight, as he prepares for sleep on his clean mattress, with his full stomach and his transformed worldview, Takeshi Yamamoto finally comprehends the true lesson of the ice cream ships. The strongest army is the one that loves its soldiers enough to keep them alive.